Hello, I am Jyotika. Welcome to Excelling Psychology. In today's class, we will solve the May June 24 paper 3 for IB Psychology. So, this class is meant for HL students. In the May June session, we were very fortunate. We got a quantitative stimulus for a change. After so many qualitative stimuli that were asked across the years, finally we had a quantitative stimulus. So it was good for the students also because quantitative ones are generally easier to answer. At least that is my opinion. And for us, it is very helpful because now when we are practicing past papers, we have a quantitative stimulus to practice as well. So we will not be one sided in our practice. Okay, in this class, I will read aloud the stimulus first and then we'll start answering some questions. I know I need not read aloud the stimulus. You can pause, you can read, or you must be having the paper with you. But why I'm going to read it out aloud is to show you how you should be reading the stimulus in paper 3. In paper 3, as you know, the questions are fixed beforehand. The first 3 questions are always going to be the same. The next 2 questions can vary a little, but they are very, very predictable. There are only 2 or 3 options from which those questions can be phrased. That gives you the advantage that when you're reading the stimulus, you can read it according to the requirements of the question, which are going to come later. And trust me, if you want to score high on paper 3, your effort begins right from reading the stimulus. Lots of students take this approach that they're in a haste to answer the questions. So they will read through very quickly through the stimulus. They'll get as fast as possible to writing the answers. Then when they are writing, they make a lot of mistakes because they haven't read carefully. They don't know all the features clearly that they need to write below. They keep on going back and forth between the passage, reading two lines, writing the answers. And in the process, they make a lot of mistakes. When you read the passage continuously right at the beginning and you read it carefully in a very meaningful way, then later you save the effort of going back and forth and misunderstanding things because you're in a haste and you're worried. So trust me, it is worth taking as much time as is required for you to read the passage carefully and only then begin answer writing. As I read out this passage aloud, I will be highlighting some areas to show you as you're reading what you need to focus on, what you need to keep in mind. I'm going to show you the strategy of reading the passage before we can start answering the questions. So let's begin. The stimulus material below is based on a published quantitative study on the possible differences in recall and comprehension between screen reading and paper reading. Okay, my highlighter seems to be stuck. Just a minute, I'll just open this document again. So the first thing we need to note when we are reading is quantitative study. Mentally, this helps us to prepare that for some of the questions, we know, like say generalizability, if it is asked in 9 marker, we need to answer a little differently if it's a quantitative or a qualitative stimulus. So this primes us into focusing only on what we have learned in the quantitative section of research methods. Also, it helps us to narrow down our focus. Once we've read quantitative study, we know it's going to be either a structured interview, structured observation, or an experiment. So now we are ready with a limited selection of what can be possible for a quantitative study. We need not focus on the qualitative parts. Like mentally, we can eliminate those research methods. Secondly, differences in recall comprehension and comprehension between screen reading and paper reading. This immediately tells me that there is a comparison between two conditions, especially the use of the word differences directly indicates that this is an experiment. We know when the research method is experiment, there is going to be a comparison between conditions. And the very first question on paper 3 is going to be what is the research method and give 2 characteristics of it. So right at the beginning, I've understood that this is an experiment. Further reading will help me know which type of an experiment it is. Although here it's clear there is a manipulated IV. It's not a natural experiment. But is it field or is it laboratory? I will come to know soon. So, but I am, as I'm reading, because I'm noticing very carefully what are the features mentioned, I'm mentally ready to deal with what is coming next. I'm going to be very focused. Instead of doing guesswork as to what to come next, I know exactly what to expect. Helps in writing answers better, helps in writing focused answers. Let's come to the next paragraph. As most students are using laptops and smartphones, they are reading more digital text and less printed text. Here they're giving some rationale for the study. Although some studies indicate that paper readers score significantly higher in comprehension and recall tests than screen readers, not all studies agree. Because past findings are inconsistent, the aim of this study was to further investigate possible differences in recall and comprehension between screen and paper writing. Mentally keep on summarizing what you're reading in a paragraph. I know this paragraph might not be directly relevant for any of the answers that we are going to write, but are you understanding the passage? It will help you take a check on that. So, just after reading a paragraph very quickly, within a few seconds, think to yourself what has been told to me in this paragraph. So, what they are saying is past research has been inconclusive about which type of reading is more helpful for understanding and memory, screen reading or paper reading. And that's why this study is looking out for a final answer to this question. Okay, so this is what I've understood. Now I can move to the next paragraph. The hypothesis of the study is that participants in the paper reading condition would score higher in recall and comprehension tests compared to screen readers. In the beginning, I noted that this is an experiment. I don't know it's a true experiment or a field experiment. But I just noted there is an experiment and there's manipulation of the ID. That is helping me when I'm reading to pick out on what are the important features which are given here because I know what the method is. So when it comes to experiment, I know hypothesis or prediction of the results is a very critical feature. So that helps me to focus on hypothesis. When I look at it, I know this is an important point that I need to understand really well to be able to answer my questions. The study used a volunteer sample. We know the second question on the paper is going to be on the sampling method and to give features of the method. So immediately when we look at, okay, the sample is given, we should make a strong mental note of it. Here, one more thing to notice is compared to all the past papers which were coming in which they always used to have a purposive sample, finally they have changed the sampling method to volunteer sampling. So good, again, it's very helpful for practice. So volunteer sample consisting of 80 fourth year students from medical college in Asia. Very important to note where they are coming from and how they are coming because helps us to answer not only the sampling question, also any question on bias and generalizability which comes towards the ending 9 marker. These points are very useful. The sample consisted of 34 males and 46 females of several ethnicities. Always keep in mind when it comes to questions of biases, credibility, generalizability, you're not only expected to criticize or give weaknesses, you can give strengths as well. So notice good things also about the sample, such as it's coming from several ethnicities. Many students have the tendency to focus only on the negative aspects of any study. Do note the positive ones also to give well rounded answers. The participants were not forced to participate. They were fully informed about the study and they signed consent forms. A question is going to be there on ethics. That's the 6 marker. So keep noting whatever they're telling us about ethics. So far it is ethical. They know everything about the study and they've signed consent forms. Right to withdraw is also there in the next sentence. We can see they were also told they could withdraw from the study whenever they wanted. The participants were tested in groups and randomly allocated into two conditions. One, random allocation is again a feature of a true experiment. So now finally I know this is a true experiment. Secondly, can help me to answer the question on research method and characteristics. Another thing is when it comes to again biases, credibility, random allocation can be a strength of any study. So here there are two conditions into which random allocation was done as we would expect. One is screen reading and the other is paper reading. The study took place in a psychology laboratory at the college. So this makes it even more clear that it's a true experiment because directly they have stated that it's taking place in a laboratory. The material used had nothing to do with medicine but was judged to be interesting enough to maintain focus. Again, a point helpful for bias and credibility. All participants had the same amount of time to read the same material. One feature of true experiments is standardization. So, when they say something is same or consistent for everybody, that covers a feature of true experiments. After this, they all had the same amount of time to take recall test and comprehension test. Here we see operationalization of the dependent variable, how their comprehension and memory is tested through recall and comprehension tests. I hope you're noticing that as I'm reading the passage, though it's given like a very simple report, I am going on seeing which features are then mentally noting them. No doubt you'll feel that is something you can do when you look at the questions, then you can read back and think where are the features. But when you read like this, while reading the first time only you keep on noticing what are the features, you're very less likely to make mistakes later, and later you're very less likely to overlook some of the points. Later, when you're answering and you read back, you read in piecemeal fashion. That time what happens is you read one section, you feel okay, it is this, you have lost context because you're not going to read the whole passage again and again. So you might make mistakes in understanding the features at that time. When you're reading in full context and you keep on noting the features mentally, that time you're less likely to make mistakes. And also, why make a double effort of keeping on going to the questions, looking back to what is there? Right now only you can notice the features which are there. So then later on, no doubt you will have to look again, but it will be just a quick glance that you have to give before writing the answer. Okay, let's come to the final paragraph. The statistical test showed no significant difference between performance in the two conditions. Therefore, the null hypothesis was accepted. Very helpful point for publication bias if we need to discuss. The researchers have accepted the null hypothesis. The expectation is not been proven. Still, they have uh, published the study. They have made that choice to publish that the expectation is not supported by the study. It increases credibility. Also, for an experimental feature point of view, we know the hypothesis is always tested. The null hypothesis is tested at the end. So this is one more feature we can include. I know we have to include only two features and I'm noting many just because I know students have different preferences. So as a student, which one do you want to note? You should know all the possibilities when you're reading. But if you're fixed in your mind, you want to cover say only standardization, only hypothesis, you need not focus on everything like I'm focusing. You can mark only those points which are of relevance to you. The researchers concluded that this study showed little difference in recall and comprehension between paper and screen reading. So we know the researchers wanted to answer the question which one is better, but they haven't been able to find an answer. In follow up discussions, participants said the material was easy to read and there was enough time to read the questions. According to the researchers, screen reading is convenient and encourages enthusiasm to learn. Consequently, more research is needed to determine if screen reading can also promote increased recall and comprehension. So this last paragraph, it has one or two features, like it does mention follow-up discussion also, again very good from credibility point of view. The study is largely quantitative, yet the researchers have tried to put in an effort to get some qualitative data, some context, some insights into what was students' experience in the study. So definitely highlights a merit of the study. Remaining, like I've said, this paragraph does not have too many features for an experiment. So as such, you can just, after reading it, summarize in your mind and have you understood this paragraph as well as the whole study. Before answering the questions, when you reach the last point, just think about, in your own words, have you understood the study, or do you need to read back to it once more? One more reading is never any harm. Reading the stimulus once, twice, thrice, it's not a waste of time. It's a very good practice to keep on reading till you know exactly what the passage is about. Trust me, it will save a lot of time in answering the questions. The other approach is not good. Being unclear on the passage and directly starting to answer the questions, that's not a good approach to take to paper 3. So, to summarize the whole paragraph, in my words, what I have understood is they've compared two conditions, screen reading and paper reading, for two dependent variables, two behaviors they were interested in, recall and comprehension. They were expecting to find that paper reading will be more meritorious and to finally answer past studies which have been inconclusive, but that is not what they were able to find. They found that in both conditions, regardless of which type of reading students did, they did give a good performance on comprehension and memory. There's no significant difference in their performance. So they have accepted the null hypothesis, they have chosen to publish the study regardless. And on the way of seeing the passage, I noted many things about the passage which are typical of true experiment. I saw lots of things were standardized, like presentation of material, time taken to answer the tests. I also noted that what type of sampling was done, volunteer sampling with only medical students. So, in my mind, I am able to think about a lot of things regarding representativeness, credibility, and so forth. Okay, once you're satisfied and convinced that you've understood the passage fully, then you can begin answering the questions. So, at this point, I would like to take up the first question. So, as we go about answering these questions, I will also explain to you what's the strategy of answering, how you should organize your answer, and what is my thought process behind answering. The first question is the fixed one. Identify the research method used and outline two characteristics of the method. As far as identify the research method is concerned, okay, as far as identify the research method is concerned, you just need to literally state what the research method is. You need not elaborate and explain as to why you're saying that is the research method. So, one mark is strictly for being able to correctly name the research method that has been used. Then you have to give two characteristics. As such, the IB is not very strict on having to link the characteristics to the situation given. Nevertheless, it is good practice to not only like state the characteristics but also show where those characteristics are found in the given scenario. So I will suggest that do contextualize the answer, do contextualize the features which you are stating. I'll give an example of how we can do this. So now the answer which I'm presenting, no doubt it's a sample answer. You don't have to write exactly how I'm writing, but just take note of what content I'm covering and how I'm covering it. The research method used is true experiment. You can also call it a laboratory experiment, but in the IB, I've seen generally the term true experiment is used. So I'm just sticking with that term and I'm calling it true experiment. Now I can give any two characteristics of my choice. One, I believe my writing style strictly, not does not have to be for everybody. Whenever we talk of a true experiment, I feel the most defining feature is manipulation of the independent variable. So I always like to point out that one. Besides that, I either like to talk about control or standardization. In this passage, from a control point of view, it was not very obvious to me which are the extraneous variables that they've taken care of. But what was very prominent was standardization. So I would like to take that as one of the features. That's my choice. Your choice could be to take quantitative data as one of the features, or maybe you want to talk about hypothesis, proposal of hypothesis and verification. You could take those also as features. I'm sure there are number of more features possible, not coming to my mind right now, but these are just two examples which I'm writing down. So one, also just write in paragraph or essay format. Many students ask me, can we write in bullet points? You're quite at a higher level now to be able to be writing like without I would say, in my opinion, without much communicative ability, without much writing skill. So please write with good writing skills and make sure to write in proper essay format, and in this case in a proper paragraph format. One feature of this research method is manipulation of the independent variable. To contextualize this point, I would just say in this study, manipulation is of what type of reading participants have done, screen reading or paper reading. So in the given scenario, in the given stimulus, the independent variable was type of reading, manipulated at two levels: screen reading and paper reading. So this is how we contextualize. We just relate the point to the study and point out where that feature is seen. Another feature or characteristic is standardization. Please excuse my typing. So another feature is standardization of the procedure. Standardization is done in a number of ways, so I will not be able to point out everything in the stimulus that is standardized, but definitely I can give one or two examples. So for example, in the given stimulus, the time given to read the passage, to read the material, I'm just trying to use as much wording as possible from the situation itself. So the time given to read the material to all participants was the same. And for one more example, the time to answer the recall and comprehension tests was the same, etc. Okay, so that is how we can answer the first question. I hope it's clear to you. Let me paste the second question. That is also exactly as expected. Describe the sampling method used in this study. In this question, if you notice, unlike the first one, the IB is not very direct on how many features you need to give, because we know for description of sampling method we will have to give features, but they haven't specified how many features to give, so they've kind of left it to us. But considering that the mark limit is the same, this is also for 3 marks, so logically it follows that we should take the same approach to answering this question that we are taking to answer the previous one. So for 1 mark, we can just state the sampling method without needing to give any justification. Just state the correct sampling method used. And here, making a mistake should be actually difficult because they're very direct in telling us what is the sampling method used. They've directly said it's volunteer sampling. So I hope you won't make mistake in identification. And then to describe it, we can just name 2 features and contextualize them. So taking exactly the same approach that we did to the previous question. So here I would say the sampling method used is volunteer sampling. You can call it self-selected sample or so. It's correct. It's just that trying to make use of wording given in the text. One feature, as we know, volunteer sampling, the defining feature in my opinion is the willingness of participants to be involved in the study. So participants come forward for the study out of their own will. That's something which is very directly mentioned in the passage. So there, like we had seen very directly, they have told us that it was a volunteer sample. They were not forced to participate. They were fully informed. So that means makes it very clear that they wanted to participate, right? So this is how we can contextualize using the wording that they have only given. We can make it clear that they were willing to participate. So we can put it this way. Again, the wording can be the same as in the previous answer. One feature of this sampling method is that participants willingly take part in the study. As specified in the given scenario, participants were not forced to participate in this study. Rather, their full informed consent was taken before including them. Another feature of a volunteer sample is that there is some sort of announcement made or advertisement given, and then people come in response to that advertisement. Only I don't think I'll be able to contextualize it well because I'm not sure here where they announced the study of where did they ask participants to come forward for the study. So that is a point I'm avoiding. One thing we can know is when it comes to these research method and sampling type of answers, even strengths and weaknesses, that is evaluative points of these research methods, even they count as characteristics or features. So one feature which we also often take as a limitation of volunteer samples is that they tend to be similar to each other and they tend to have some common shared characteristics, which is very clear in this stimulus if we see. They were all fourth year medical students from the same college in Asia. So then I would like to take that as a feature. Like undoubtedly there are many general features that I can take possible for any research method or sampling method. I just feel that the one which is very obvious to be contextualized, like very prominently there in the passage, that just becomes easier to write about. Okay, so let's come back to the answer, what we were writing. Another feature of this method is that participants recruited using it tend to share characteristics that make them similar to each other in the given stimulus. All participants were from the same medical college in Asia, studying in the fourth year, making them similar to each other. Many students ask me for a word limit for questions on paper 3. There isn't any word limit. You have fair judgment. You answer papers 1 and 2. You know how much word length is required for SAQs, ERQs. So considering how much you write for an SAQ or ERQ for 9 or 22 marks, looking at these questions with just 3 marks, you should be able to have a rough estimate of how much will justify compared to an SAQ of 9 marks, how much you should be writing for 3 marks, about one third of what you write in a 9 marker, right? Makes sense. So try to follow that as a rule of thumb. It's not very precise, I know, but that's the best estimate we have. Okay, another question within the first set of questions which are fixed is suggest one alternative or one additional research method that could be used to investigate the aim of the original study. Give one reason for your choice. In this answer, two things are very important. One, to be very explicit about the method you're giving. Is it alternative or is it additional? There should be no confusion in the researcher's mind. So are you suggesting that what method has been used, like true experiment, along with that, another method should be used, in which case it is additional? Or are you suggesting in place of true experiment, in place of what has been used, something else should have been used as a replacement? In that sense, then you would be suggesting an alternative method. So one thing is to be very clear what you're suggesting. Explicitly mention this should be additional or alternative. The second thing is to choose a method very logically. Whichever method has been given in the stimulus, it will definitely have some drawbacks or some limitations. So the method which you suggest as an alternative or addition should be something that can overcome the weakness or limitation of the method given, should contribute to the study. It shouldn't be something that is doing having the same purpose, like the similar strengths and weaknesses as the method which is already given in the stimulus. Then there's no purpose, like it won't contribute anything additional by including it. So first in your mind, you already know, you've identified that this, for example, is a true experiment from what you've learned in the course in research methods. That's why research methods is so important. Like students will ask me, why do we have to learn so much when we don't have to answer everything in the paper? Because it helps you to decide how to answer. So coming back to the point, because you've learned to experiment, you know what its weaknesses are, then that will help you to judge. By knowing what the weaknesses are, what could be something that could help, some research method that could help overcome these weaknesses, right? So for example, one limitation we know of a research of a true experiment is It collects very limited data, quantitative data that also very specific to how the dependent variable has been operationalized. So always taking an interview with open questions or performing an observation which is descriptive in nature, qualitative type, can be a very helpful addition to an experiment to explore further, to get further insights. In this study, they have mentioned some discussion that they have had with participants in the end, but it seems to be a very brief discussion, not a full fledged interview. So, we can suggest an interview and we can give some examples of what questions could be asked or what could be explored that would give great insights, which are not discovered in this study. So, that's one choice. If you're taking that, and that's a very popular choice, then just make sure to specify which type of interview is going to be structured, semi-structured, unstructured, and to give some examples of questions that would be asked. As of now, I'm not taking that approach. I want to give a different type of answer. I would like to suggest an alternative method instead of this method. So, different method altogether. One weakness of true experiments is that they really lack in ecological validity. So I feel a field experiment would be more suitable to know, since these are college students and the topic is very relevant to academics, like reading on the screen or reading on paper. I feel it should be done in an academic setting to get realistic results. So for that sake, I feel doing a field experiment would be better. So taking ecological validity or mundane realism as a feature, I would suggest that this should be substituted by a field experiment. Also, because in lab experiments there's a tendency to show demand characteristics. So I believe when it comes to something like recall and comprehension, participants are bound to put some unusual effort when they're in the laboratory to try to remember very well or to try to understand very well, which they wouldn't if they were in their normal classrooms. So I feel to get results which are devoid of demand characteristics, the study should have been done in a real setting. So, considering those limitations, I feel a field experiment would be a suitable replacement. Again, you can have your own thought process behind it, what you feel is better. There is no right or wrong answer to these type of questions. It all depends on how you justify the choice that you have made and how you correctly contextualized way you elaborate on the points that you're making. It's all about your writing skill and your psychological understanding. It's not about definite answers that you can memorize or be sure of and give. These questions are not meant to be answered that way. Also, I had mentioned that in the first point, research methods, if mostly we see the ID is not very clear, they want us to contextualize or not. But when it comes to sampling method and additional alternative research methods, they are very clear on contextualization. You have to contextualize your points. So don't just write, for example, that we should do a field experiment because it has less demand characteristics and because it is done in a real setting. Be more specific than that and write with respect to the stimulus why it would be important to avoid demand characteristics or to have a real setting. So again, I'll give you an example of this. Also, before I forget, I will just make sure to uh, prepare a PDF copy of the answers that I'm writing and link it for download in the description box and the pinned comment below, so that when you're watching this video, if you can keep the answers alongside with you or for later reference, that can be very helpful to you. Okay, let's quickly answer this question, and this will be the last question that I'm answering in this video because unfortunately I have to leave for a class. So then I will try to cover the 6 and 9 markers in the next part of this video. Okay, here how I can phrase the answer is, and, and now please pay attention to this, alternative research method. I'm being very explicit that this is going to be alternative and not additional. Very, very important to specify this. An alternative research method that could be used is a field experiment. Now it's all about justification. Again, because it's 3 marks, 2 points of justification should suffice. It's not 9 marks that I should get really elaborate and explain exactly how it should be done. I need not go in that much detail. Field experiments are conducted in real settings. Unlike laboratory or true experiments, which are conducted in the laboratory, giving field experiments higher ecological validity. I want you to notice something in my style of writing. I have mentioned that field experiments have good ecological validity, but not in isolation. I have directly compared them with lab experiments and have said that in comparison to lab experiments, they have better ecological validity. Why have I done this? Because the stimulus is a lab experiment. I have to be relevant to the stimulus. So I have to keep on specifying this method is better than the given method for this reason. So that should be my writing style. In the given stimulus, reading, comprehension and memory were tested in a laboratory, which does not give a true idea of how they would be affected by screen or paper reading in actual academic contexts. So here you can see how I'm contextualizing the point or making it relevant to the given stimulus. So conducting the same study in a classroom would have given better ecological validity. You can also call it external validity. It's just that ecological validity is more specific. External is broad based because it can refer to population validity as well. Another advantage of field experiments is that they can curtail demand characteristics, as compared to true experiments, which provoke participants to change their behavior, or we can say they induce. If we don't like the word provoke, we can say induce participants to change their behavior from knowledge that they are part of a study. In the given stimulus, participants may have deliberately put more effort into comprehending and recalling the given material, as they knew they were in a in an experiment, in a field experiment. They would not be informed about the study taking place, so they would not put more effort increasing credibility of findings. Okay, so as I've said, I will link the answer to in the description box below. You can download from there and you can go through the answers. Let me know if you have any feedback about the answers or this video in the comments box below. I do read all the comments. So if you leave a comment below, I will answer your questions or address your doubts. I also leave my contact number and email ID in the box below. That is meant for you to contact me if you want tuition in psychology. If you contact me on those numbers or that ID for anything on the video, then I will not be answering your questions. So if you want an answer to your questions about the video, do leave your queries in the comments box below. You can also leave suggestions on what other video you would like to see relating to IB psychology. I will try to upload part 2 of this class quickly. Um, till I see you next time, then that's all I have for today. All the best for your coming papers. and goodbye. Take care. Thank you for watching.